Bali is one of my favorite lifestyle locations around the world. I'm here right now with this beautiful rice field behind me in this beautiful villa here in Umalas near the Canggu area. And because of this, for a while I've been playing with the idea of potentially buying a villa here in Bali. The Bali Villa market has been one of the hottest real estate markets in recent years, with nomads and expats from around the world flocking to this tropical destination as a second or even main home in many cases. Many of them renting them out, where a lot of these developers are promising absolutely mouth-watering 10, 15, even 20% yields. But in this video, I will tell you why, despite the hype after doing my research, buying a villa in Bali is probably not for me. Of course, I have to say that this video is not legal advice. This is not investment advice. I'm not pretending to be an expert in Indonesian law. And this is not meant to tell you like, oh, you shouldn't buy a villa here. It's a terrible decision. I'm just going to lay out the 5 things that you need to be aware of when you're buying a villa in Bali, so that at least you're aware of it. And if you're fine with all of these things, then by all means you can go ahead and buy your villa. I'm just telling you why, for these 5 reasons, I am not going to do so. And at the end, I will tell you the 2 cases where buying a villa actually does make sense in Bali. So on the surface, buying a villa in Bali seems like the absolute dream investment. First of all, the prices are extremely attractive. The kinds of villas you can get here are absolutely amazing. You can get a villa with a pool, 3 bedrooms, overlooking rice fields, with amazing cafes and gyms and activities near you for like $150,000, $200,000, $250,000, which is not something you can get in that many places in the world. And then if you look at the rates that you can actually charge for these villas, let's say you put them on Airbnb or something like that, they are absolutely crazy. This villa I'm in right now, I paid around $2,700 a month for this. And if I were to buy this, it would probably be not more than $200,000 for this villa. And on top of all of this, you can use this villa not only to get returns when you're not there, but to use it as part of your global lifestyle. Many people like to come to Bali for 1, 2, 3, even 6 months of the year. And if you spend less than 6 months in Indonesia, you do not become a tax resident. You can also use this villa to live here part-time while staying tax optimal. So it seems almost too good to be true. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why, indeed, in 90% of cases, it is too good to be true. So now let's go over the 5 things that you need to understand that these property developers will not tell you about buying a villa here in Bali. The first thing is leasehold versus freehold. Now, this is the one out of these 5 points that most people, I feel like, know at this point. In Indonesia, if you're a foreigner, you cannot own land. You cannot actually outright own these villas as a foreigner. So when we're talking about buying a villa in Bali, what we're really talking about is leasing a villa in Bali for a period of 30 years or something like that. Now, often these will have extension clauses. Indonesia, unlike many other countries like Thailand, for example, uses what's called the principle of freedom of contract when you negotiate these lease terms with the landowners, where essentially whatever you agree with the landowner, whatever is put in the contract is absolutely fine. However, they do, as far as I'm aware, have a limit of 30 years, which can have the option to extend, but you need to be careful about those, because it might be the option to extend for you, but without you knowing, it might also mean that it is the option to extend for the landlord. So if the landlord decides at the end of the lease to not extend the lease, you might indeed lose your villa. And even in the case where you have the option to extend and they do want to extend it, it is still a lease. And when you're doing that, you are extending the lease, which means you have to pay again. So let's say you pay $200,000 for the villa. Even if you can extend that lease at the end of 30 years, you need to most likely pay that $200,000 or whatever is the land value at that time again. So if you want to keep this for the rest of your life, the total investment is going to be much more than what you're paying up front. And there's all kinds of schemes that people will tell you about, like, oh, you can use this nominee structure, or you can use this company, but all of that is fully illegal. And also, let's say you use one of these nominees, legally the nominee owns that property. So if they decide to run away with it, you have absolutely no legal right. What you can do is, let's say you have an Indonesian partner, an Indonesian wife, you can buy it and put it in the Indonesian wife's name. That is absolutely fine. But then legally, the wife owns it. So if something were to happen, she runs away, then she gets to keep the villa. And even if you're married, you literally have to structure your prenup in such a way that there is a clause that gives the villa to the wife in the case of a divorce. And if you do that, you need to be fine with that risk. Maybe you're fine with that, but that is just something that you need to know. And the second issue that this brings is point number 2, which is that it is a depreciating asset. So maybe you're fine with the idea of just having the lease. Okay, you're getting your rental return, no big deal. Many people don't consider is that what happens is that because the lease is always running down, the lease is going to be less valuable, obviously, in year 10 than it is in year 0. Because at the any time when you sell this property, what you're selling is the lease with the amount of years that is left on that lease. So if you sell a lease with 1 year left, obviously no one's going to pay the same price as they could get for a 30-year lease. And here's where you start to see where these 20% returns aren't really what they seem to be, because you can't use the same kind of math that you would use for a property investment, perhaps in your home country, because in any given year, your principal value is declining. And the fact that it's declining also makes this a lot less liquid. From what I hear, it's very common that people simply, when they buy these leases, they keep the lease until the end, because it's very difficult to sell these, especially as the years go by. So essentially, if this is an investment for you, you need to make all of your money back just on rent alone, which brings us to the next issue of point number 3. You cannot legally rent out a villa as a foreigner without a foreign-owned company. In Indonesia, renting out property is a business activity, and to run this activity, you need a villa license, and to get a villa license, you need an Indonesian company. And for foreigners, specifically what you need is the PTPMA, the foreign-owned Indonesian company. Okay, so then you might say, what's the issue? I'll just set up an Indonesian company so that I can rent out this legally. Well, the issue with that is that in order to set up a PTPMA, you need to put a total of 10 billion Indonesian rupiah in paid up capital into that company for you to be allowed to operate it. And this is the kind of thing where what you will hear when you talk about this to like company formation agents or something like that, they'll just tell you like, yeah, that's technically the rule, but no one really does that. No one checks. And just to me personally, whenever I hear this kind of thing about, oh, no one checks, it's a massive red flag. Me personally, like, call me boring, but I always wanna be fully legal. To me, it's not worth my peace of mind to do something illegally where at any point they could start deciding to enforce this rule, and then I'm absolutely screwed. And this is the point that people simply will not talk about. And why will they not talk about it? Why do these villa investors who brag about their investments on YouTube not talk about this? Well, because they know that they are in a gray area. They know that they are doing this illegally. They obviously don't want people to know about this, but it is absolutely also true that the government for now have not really been enforcing this. But my thing is, as Indonesia develops, and by the way, it's one of the fastest growing economies in the world, at some point it will become a priority for them to start enforcing these rules. My thing is that if I'm not fine with the rules in some country, I can always just go somewhere else. I can put my money in so many different markets where it's fully legal. And by the way, I'll share some different options later on in the video, even in the region. By the way, I'm not a super big fan, obviously, of needing to put 600,000 into a company just to be able to operate it. I think it's kind of stupid. But if I'm not fine with that rule, I can just go somewhere else, take my money somewhere else. If you're fine with being in the gray area, if you're fine with doing something illegal, that is obviously on you. I just don't recommend it, and it's not something that I want to be involved in. And at this point, I'm just not really willing to put $600,000 into an Indonesian company just to own a depreciating asset, villa rental. But on the other hand, this is also kind of a gray area. Like, there's some information out there that says like, okay, if you occasionally rent it out and it's not rented out as a business activity, then it might be fine. And then it's like, okay, if you outsource it to a management company, is it then legal? Because then technically you're not renting it out. And all of this is just like not clearly defined. But for me, this is just something that I just rather put my money into something where it's clear, like somewhere where I know exactly how things are, rather than into this kind of gray area. Now, obviously, this is only relevant if you're planning to rent it out. If you're planning to live there, then that is a whole different question, and we'll talk more about that later on in the video. Point number 4 that you need to know is taxes. Now, there's several taxes that you're going to have to pay on this villa rental, again, if you choose to rent it out. Firstly, you have to pay income tax at 10% of the rental income value. If you rent out multiple properties, you also have to pay VAT on that, which is 11%. For high-end villas, there's a luxury tax of 20%, and if you sell it, there's a capital gains tax, which is calculated, by the way, on the entire value of the contract, not just on your profit. So the tax situation also is not very favorable, which is why people will often just hold out these villas until the end of the lease rather than selling them. And point number 5 is high supply. There are a ton of villas. There is endless competition already in the market. Like, when I go on Airbnb, there's so many options at such great prices, and these villas are so unique as well. So even though the yield on paper might be 25%, what is the occupancy rate really going to be? Sure, if you create a super unique villa, you can definitely compete and you can definitely make money, but it is not going to be as easy to earn these returns as you probably think because of the competition. And so for all of these reasons, I've decided that at least for now, I'm going to put my money elsewhere and take advantage of all the amazing options of renting villas when I do decide to spend time here in Bali. So what are the markets that I am looking at instead? Well, the primary one and the place where I am going to buy property very soon is the UAE. It essentially offers the best of both worlds of developing markets in that it's still growing. There's a lot of opportunity, but also developed markets where things are more robust. The regulations are clear. I can own it. It's very, very business friendly. It's a very easy process in general. The yields are not 20%, but by global standards, they are extremely good. And it's also a place where I obviously live most of the time, so it makes a lot of sense. And on this video, I have a bunch of videos on Dubai real estate specifically that you might want to check out if you're interested. And if you're interested in buying real estate in Dubai, I actually have a contact of a real estate agent that you can speak to for free from the first link down below in the description. But I'm also looking at other markets in Southeast Asia. Primarily, I'm looking at number one, Thailand. Also has its own issues. You also cannot own land, but the regulation side is at least a lot more clear. You can legally rent it out as a foreigner. Now, if you do it for short periods, you need a hotel license, but it's not nearly as difficult to get one as in Indonesia. However, you can also own apartments outright. And if I were to buy it, I'd be looking at a place like Bangkok anyway. But obviously, it also has its own challenges. The yields aren't that great necessarily, at least in places like Bangkok. A lot of condos might ban Airbnbs if you're looking to do Airbnb. I'm not saying it's an easy market, but at least to me, a lot more clear and safe compared to Bali. Other ones are Malaysia. Here again, you can own apartments and you can also own land if it is of a minimum value. It's going to offer perhaps better yields than a place like Bangkok and lower prices as well. So for a lot of people, this is also very attractive. For me personally though, I'm not really interested in spending time in Malaysia, and ideally I'd buy places in locations that I actually want to spend time in as well, so I can also use it as a second home at the same time. And then of course you have Singapore. If you're very high net worth, it's a very safe place to store your wealth. Again, perhaps not the highest yields, and it's going to be very expensive, but for a lot of people that can also be interesting. So I mentioned that there are two cases when buying a villa in Bali does in fact make sense, and why I personally might at some point in the future still buy one despite of all the things that I said. Case number one is if you actually live there full time. You understand that you only have a leasehold. You understand that after 30 years or whatever, you're going to have to extend it, whatever. If you're fine with that and you just want to have a long-term home, you're still going to be able to have it as a home for the rest of your life, assuming you have those extension clauses and things like that. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And in that case, obviously, you don't have to worry about the fact that you cannot rent it out. You don't have to worry about putting the 600,000 on an Indonesian company, because if you just live there and you don't rent it out, you don't need any of that. And let's say you buy a villa for $200,000, but you live there for 20 years, what you're essentially paying is $6,500 per year in rent for that villa, which is obviously much lower than you can pay if you were to rent it normally. And the second case is if you are willing to put that $600,000 into the Indonesian company. And by the way, it's 10 billion rupiah, and the rupiah keeps depreciating, so the amount in US dollars is probably going down over time, but that is the amount right now. So for example, if you're looking to build multiple villas and you really have a proper investment company with proper employees where that 600,000 isn't really that much to you, then definitely it could really make sense, assuming you're doing everything legally. So it is not impossible that I might end up doing something in Bali in the future. Let's say I decide like, hey, I want to spend like a good amount of time here, and I don't mind the fact that I stay in the villa when I'm here and then I perhaps keep it empty when I'm away. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it never makes sense. I'm just saying that these are the 5 things that you actually should know that many people will not tell you if you're looking to invest here in Bali. Now, I mentioned that the market where I am instead looking to buy is the UAE. So if you want to see more details on what it actually looks like to buy property in Dubai and the UAE, you can watch this video right here for my full guide on buying property in Dubai. So watch that video next, and I will see you in the next one.